I'll never forget the exact words my sister screamed at me that Christmas night, standing in my living room, holding expensive wine, surrounded by her ungrateful family, who had invaded my mountain sanctuary without permission. "You pathetic parasite! Get out of our house right now, or I'm calling the cops." Her face was flushed red from alcohol, her eyes blazing with an entitlement so profound it actually made me laugh. That's when I knew everything was about to change. But before I tell you how that night ended with 7 people being escorted out into a blizzard by the police, how I systematically dismantled the comfortable life I'd built for my sister with a few taps on my phone, and how she eventually lost everything, including her marriage, I need you to do something for me. If you're enjoying this story of standing up to toxic family members, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your life, and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything and helps me share these important stories with others who need to hear them. Now let me take you back to the beginning because this nightmare had been building for years. My name is Natalie Brooks, though my sister Chloe and I both carried our mother's maiden name Vance growing up. I'm 37 and Chloe is 32. 5 years doesn't sound like much, but in our family it meant everything. When our mother died 7 years ago from cancer, her final words to me were whispered through labored breaths in that sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and approaching death. "Take care of your sister, Natalie. Promise me. She's not as strong as you." I held her frail hand and promised, tears streaming down my face, having no idea that promise would become a chain around my neck for the next 7 years. I kept that promise with everything I had. I worked myself to the bone as a real estate agent in Denver, building a successful career through 18-hour days and a relentless work ethic. I specialized in luxury mountain properties, the kind of places where wealthy people escaped from the world. It was grueling work, but it paid well, and I was good at it. Really good. By the time I was 30, I'd saved enough to buy myself a small apartment. By 33, I'd upgraded to a beautiful condo downtown. And by 35, I'd achieved my dream, a remote mountain estate 2 hours outside Denver, a 3-bedroom luxury chalet perched on a hillside with panoramic views of snow-capped peaks. It was my sanctuary, my reward for all those years of sacrifice. Chloe, on the other hand, had drifted through her 20s in a haze of minimum-wage jobs and failed attempts at finding herself. She'd tried being a barista, a yoga instructor, a freelance photographer. None of it stuck. When she was 27, she met Ethan Thorne at a friend's wedding. Ethan was 30, worked in middle management at a logistics company, and came from a family that had always struggled financially. His parents, Martha and Robert Thorne, were in their 60s and had never managed to secure stable housing, bouncing between rentals and occasionally staying with Ethan in his cramped 1-bedroom apartment. Chloe and Ethan's relationship moved fast. Too fast, I thought at the time, but I kept my concerns to myself. They were engaged within 6 months and married within a year. I paid for half the wedding, about $15,000, because Ethan's family couldn't contribute much and Chloe had no savings. "It's what Mom would have wanted," I told myself as I signed the check, ignoring the small voice in my head that whispered I was enabling something unhealthy. After the wedding, the requests started small. Could I help them with first and last month's rent on a better apartment? Chloe was pregnant, and their current place had a mold problem. Of course I could. That was $3,000. Could I co-sign on a car loan? Ethan's old sedan had died and they needed reliable transportation for doctor's appointments. Sure, no problem. That was a $25,000 obligation. Could I help find Ethan's parents a decent place to live? They were elderly, and the stress of their housing instability was affecting Chloe's pregnancy. I used my real estate expertise to find them a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, personally guaranteed their lease when their credit wasn't sufficient, and even negotiated down the security deposit. The baby, it turned out, was a miscarriage at 12 weeks. I held Chloe while she sobbed, brought her groceries, paid for therapy sessions she never actually attended. Ethan seemed distant during this time, more concerned about his parents' comfort than his wife's emotional state, but again, I said nothing. It wasn't my place to judge their marriage. Then came the big ask. 2 years ago, Chloe called me crying. Martha, Ethan's mother, had health issues and needed regular medical appointments across town. Could I help them get a reliable vehicle, something with space and comfort? Their current sedan wasn't suitable. I was hesitant. My savings were substantial, but not unlimited, but Chloe's voice was so desperate, so broken. Please, Nat, we can't ask anyone else. You're the only family I have who can help us. So I did what I always did. I said yes. I didn't co-sign this time. I actually took out the loan in my own name for a nearly new white SUV, $45,000, and let Chloe and Ethan make the monthly payments to me. Except their payments were sporadic at best. I ended up covering most of it myself. The apartment they were renting was also mine, though they didn't know it at first. I'd purchased it as an investment property 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Market rent was $2,500 a month, but I only charged them $800 to cover maintenance and property taxes. I told myself it was smart business keeping the property in the family, helping my sister build stability. But deep down, I knew I was subsidizing their entire lifestyle. Every few months, there was something else. Could I loan them $1,500 for an unexpected car repair, $500 for new tires, $2,000 when Ethan's hours got cut at work? Each time, Chloe promised to pay me back. As soon as things stabilize, she'd say. Once Ethan gets his promotion. When I get this photography gig. None of it ever materialized. I kept a mental tally at first, but eventually stopped because it was too depressing. Conservatively, I'd given or loaned my sister and her family over $50,000 in 7 years, not counting the indirect support through reduced rent and the car payments I covered. But here's the thing, I wasn't unhappy about helping. Not exactly. I was tired, yes. Stretched thin financially despite my successful career. But I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing. Honoring my mother's dying wish. Being a good sister. Building the kind of family bonds that would last a lifetime. I imagined future Christmases where we'd laugh about these hard years, where Chloe's kids would call me Auntie Nat, and I'd be the beloved aunt who'd helped them through tough times. What I didn't see, what I absolutely failed to recognize, was that I wasn't building bonds. I was building resentment. Chloe's resentment toward me. It started with small comments I'd brush off. Must be nice to afford that, when I mentioned a work trip to Aspen. Some of us have real responsibilities, when I talked about taking a weekend for myself. You wouldn't understand, you don't have a family to take care of, when I suggested she look for better employment. I told myself she was just stressed that money troubles made people say things they didn't mean. I made excuses for her increasingly cold demeanor, her failure to return calls, her tendency to only contact me when she needed something. Last year, I bought the mountain house. It was a foreclosure I'd been watching for months, a stunning property that had belonged to a tech executive who'd overextended himself. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rockies, a stone fireplace that reached to the cathedral ceiling, a gourmet kitchen, and most importantly, complete isolation. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. It was 45 minutes from the closest small town and 2 hours from Denver. It was perfect. I'd saved for years for a property like this, and I'd earned it. But when I told Chloe about it, her reaction wasn't happiness for me. Her face went tight, her smile forced. "Wow," she said flatly. "Must be nice to have money to burn on a vacation house while some of us are struggling to make rent." I'd just reduced her rent to $800 a month on a place worth $2,500, but pointing that out seemed cruel, so I swallowed my hurt and changed the subject. I didn't invite her to see it. Some instinct I couldn't name told me to keep this space separate sacred. This was mine, truly mine, in a way nothing else in my life was. I told her about it, vaguely mentioned I had a place in the mountains for getaways, but never gave her the address. I told her it was rustic and remote, not worth the drive for a visit. She didn't push, and I was relieved. This last year had been brutal work-wise. The real estate market was competitive. Interest rates were climbing, and I'd been running myself ragged closing deals to maintain my income level. By December, I was exhausted. I'd planned this Christmas break for months, 2 full weeks away from everything up at my mountain house with no phone service, no internet, just books and silence and snow. I'd stocked the place with enough food for a month, filled the wine cellar with some beautiful bottles I'd been saving, and prepared to hibernate. I left Denver on December 23rd after closing a major deal, my car loaded with additional supplies and gifts I'd bought myself. The drive up was peaceful, snow beginning to fall as I climbed in elevation, the world growing quieter with each passing mile. I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed: time to recharge, to remember who I was outside of being everyone's solution to their problems. But when I turned onto my private drive, the road I'd paid to have plowed and maintained, something was wrong. There were cars, two of them, a white SUV that looked sickeningly familiar and a dark sedan I didn't recognize, both parked brazenly in my driveway as if they belonged there. My stomach dropped. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, I just sat there in my car engine running, staring at those two vehicles that had no business being at my private sanctuary. The white SUV was definitely the one I'd bought for Chloe. I could see the small dent in the rear bumper from when she'd backed into a pole last spring. But how did she even know where this place was? I'd never told her the address. I'd never even told her the town. I put my car in park and got out, my boots crunching in the fresh snow. The windows of my house were blazing with light. Music thumped from inside, muffled but unmistakable. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. Someone had broken into my house and was throwing a party. No, not broken in. The door was unlocked. I turned the handle and pushed it open, and the scene that greeted me was so surreal, so infuriating, that for a moment I couldn't process it. My beautiful, peaceful living room had been transformed into the aftermath of a raucous dinner party. The massive dining table I'd carefully selected was covered in the remnants of what was clearly Christmas dinner. A stripped turkey carcass sat on a platter surrounded by empty serving dishes with congealed gravy and cold mashed potatoes. Wine bottles. My wine bottles from my carefully curated cellar were scattered across every surface, most of them empty. My cream-colored sofa had jackets thrown carelessly over it. Someone's boots, still wet with snow, had been kicked off in the middle of my Persian rug. And there, in the center of it all, were 7 people I hadn't invited and didn't want. Chloe, Ethan, his parents Martha and Robert, and 3 people I didn't immediately recognize but who I'd later learn were Ethan's brother and his family. They were lounging in my space, drinking my wine, eating my food, celebrating Christmas in my house, as if they had every right to be there. But the detail that made my blood turn to ice was small and deliberate. On my mantel, where I'd carefully placed a framed photo of my parents from their wedding day, someone had moved it aside. In its place was a professional family portrait of the Thorns, Ethan and Chloe, in the center, his parents and brother's family arranged around them, all smiling at the camera with the kind of staged happiness you see in furniture store displays. They had literally replaced my family with theirs in my own home. The music was loud, some Christmas pop station, and no one noticed me at first. I just stood there in the doorway, snowflakes melting on my shoulders, my suitcase still in my hand, trying to comprehend the absolute violation I was witnessing. Then, Ethan's brother, a stocky man in his 30s, whose name I'd learn later was Liam, looked up from his phone and saw me. His eyes widened. The smile fell from his face. He grabbed Ethan's arm and pointed at me. The music cut off abruptly. 7 faces turned toward me. The silence that fell was absolute, broken only by the crackling of my fireplace where my carefully stacked wood was burning to keep these uninvited guests warm. It was Martha who spoke first. Ethan's mother, a woman in her mid-60s with gray hair and a nervous energy that always made me uncomfortable. Her face was flushed from wine, and she seemed more confused than alarmed by my presence. "Oh," she said, her voice too loud in the sudden quiet. "You must be Natalie. You're back so much earlier than Ethan said you'd be. How was your work trip? Did you have a nice time?" Work trip. I hadn't been on a work trip. I'd been in Denver at my condo working. This was supposed to be my first visit here since Thanksgiving. What story had they told these people? Before I could respond, Chloe emerged from my kitchen, a wine glass in her hand. My wine glass, one of the set of 6 crystal pieces I'd bought in Italy 3 years ago. She was wearing a red sweater dress and heels, dressed up for Christmas dinner in my house without my permission. When she saw me, her expression didn't register surprise or guilt. It registered anger. Pure, undiluted rage flashed across her face. Her cheeks, already pink from alcohol, flushed a deeper red. Her eyes narrowed. She strode toward me. her movements sharp and aggressive, and I actually took a step back, bumping into my own front door. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Then louder for everyone to hear, she jabbed a finger at me. "You disgusting parasite! What gives you the right to show up at our Christmas celebration? Get out! Get out right now, or I swear to God I'm calling the police." The words hit me like a physical blow. Parasite. She called me a parasite. In my own house, after everything I'd done for her, after 7 years of sacrifice and support and bending over backward to help her build a life. The irony was so profound, I actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that made her flinch. "Your Christmas celebration," I said, and my voice was calm, so calm it surprised me. "Chloe, this is my house. That wine you're holding is from my cellar. The food you just ate was from my freezer and pantry. Those are my dishes, my furniture, my fireplace. And I never, not once, gave you permission to be here." I set down my suitcase and walked further into the room, my eyes scanning the destruction. Gravy had dripped onto my oak coffee table, and no one had bothered to wipe it up. Red wine was spilled on my rug. The turkey carcass had made grease stains on my tablecloth. These people had treated my sanctuary like a rental hall. "What wine?" Chloe said, her voice rising defensively, but her hand trembled slightly as she held the glass. I reached out and took it from her, not roughly, but firmly. I set it down on the table with a decisive clink. "This wine," I said, "the 2015 Bordeaux I bought in France, worth about $200 a bottle. You've gone through 3 of them tonight." I looked around at the other guilty faces, all of them suddenly very interested in their shoes. "How did you even get in here, Chloe? How did you know where this place was?" She faltered, then rallied, pulling herself up to her full height. "Ethan and I needed a place for Christmas. His family was visiting, and our apartment is too small. You have all this space just sitting here empty, being wasted. You're so selfish, hoarding this place for yourself when we have nowhere else to go." "You have an apartment," I said, my voice still eerily calm. "An apartment where the market rent is $2,500 a month and I charge you $800. You have space. You chose not to use it." "That tiny place," Chloe's voice was shrill now, "with Ethan's whole family visiting. Don't be ridiculous." "Then you could have asked me," I said, "like a normal person, like someone who respects boundaries and property rights. But you didn't ask, did you? You broke into my house." "We didn't break in." Ethan finally spoke up, and I turned to look at him properly for the first time. He was 35 average height, with thinning brown hair and a weak chin he tried to hide with a beard. Right now, he looked like a child caught stealing cookies. "The key was under the mat, we just let ourselves in. We didn't think you'd mind." "The key was under the mat for emergencies," I said, "for the property manager in case of a burst pipe or a fire. How did you even know about it?" Silence. Then Chloe looked away, and I understood. She'd been here before. She'd snooped through my property records, somehow found the address, and come up here at some point when I wasn't around. She'd planned this. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She'd deliberately invaded my space, lied to her in-laws about having permission, and thrown a party in my house knowing full well I hadn't invited her. "You need to leave," I said. "All of you, right now." "Are you insane?" Chloe shrieked. She actually shrieked, her voice echoing off my cathedral ceiling. "It's Christmas Eve. There's a blizzard outside. You can't throw us out." "Watch me," I said. That's when Chloe pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed, her face twisted with fury and something else. Fear maybe, or desperation. "Fine," she spat. "If you want to do this, we'll do this. I'm calling the cops. They'll see what you're trying to do, kicking us out on Christmas." I should have been scared. I should have been worried. But all I felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. I'd spent 7 years enabling my sister's worst impulses, and it had culminated in her screaming at me in my own home while calling the police to report me for defending my own property. "Please do," I said, and I meant it. "Call them. I'll wait." The next 20 minutes were surreal. Chloe did call 911, dramatically reporting that her sister was trying to kick her and her family out in a blizzard on Christmas Eve. Martha Thorne started crying, apologizing to me over and over, saying she'd had no idea that Ethan and Chloe had told them I was on an overseas work trip and had offered them the house for the holidays. Robert sat in stunned silence. Ethan's brother and his family began quietly gathering their things, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. I remained calm. I found my laptop, pulled up the property records showing my name as sole owner. I located my folder of important documents, the deed, the mortgage statements, my driver's license with this address listed. I laid them all out on the dining table, moving aside dirty plates and wine glasses to make space. When the police arrived, 2 officers knocked politely on my door. I let them in, noting the way they took in the scene, the obvious party aftermath, the tension crackling in the air. One of them was older, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and silver threads in her dark hair, pulled back in a neat bun. Her nameplate read Miller. "Good evening," Detective Miller said, her gaze moving between me and Chloe. "We got a call about a disturbance." "Yes?" Chloe jumped in before I could speak, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. "This woman," she pointed at me like I was a stranger, "broke into our Christmas celebration and is trying to throw us out into a blizzard. She's been harassing us all night. This is our rental property for the holiday, and she's trying to illegally evict us." Detective Miller's eyebrow rose slightly. She looked at me. "And you are Natalie Brooks," I said calmly. "I'm the sole owner of this property. This is my sister Chloe Vance and her husband Ethan Thorne along with his family. They're here without my permission or knowledge. I came home from Denver tonight to find them having a party in my house." I gestured to the dining table where I'd laid out my documents. "My property deed is there along with mortgage statements, utility bills in my name, and my driver's license showing this as my registered address." Detective Miller moved to the table, her partner, a younger male officer, staying near the door. She examined each document carefully, taking her time. The silence was excruciating. I could hear Chloe breathing rapidly, almost hyperventilating. Martha was crying softly into Robert's shoulder. After what felt like an eternity, Detective Miller looked up. Her expression was professional, but I caught a flicker of something, sympathy maybe, or understanding. She'd probably seen this kind of family drama before. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "these documents appear to be in order. You are the legal owner of this property, correct?" "Yes," I said. "And did you give anyone permission to be here tonight?" "No," I said, "I did not." She turned to Chloe. "Ms. Vance, do you have any documentation showing you have a legal right to be here? A rental agreement, written permission from the owner." Chloe's face went from red to pale in seconds. We're family. She's my sister. I don't need written permission." "Actually, you do," Detective Miller said, not unkindly but firmly. "Under Colorado law, entering someone's property without permission, even if you're related, constitutes criminal trespass. Ms. Brooks would be within her rights to press charges." The room erupted. Martha's soft crying turned into loud sobs. Robert started apologizing profusely. Ethan looked like he might be sick. Chloe just stood there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I'm not pressing charges," I said, and everyone looked at me. "Not tonight, anyway. I just want them to leave, all of them, immediately." Detective Miller nodded. "That's more than fair, Ms. Brooks." She turned to address the room. "Folks, you need to gather your belongings and vacate the property. Ms. Brooks has been extremely gracious in not pursuing criminal charges." That's when Martha Thorne approached me, her face blotchy from crying. "Ms. Brooks, I'm so sorry. I swear we had no idea. Ethan told us you were traveling for work, that you'd offered your home for us to spend Christmas here because our apartment was too small. If I'd known we were trespassing, I never would have come. Please believe me." I looked at this woman, this stranger who'd been lied to by her own son, and I felt a twinge of pity. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I believe you, Mrs. Thorne. I do. But the fact that you were lied to doesn't change what happened here tonight. Your family, under the direction of my sister and your son, invaded my private space, and more than that, I looked directly at Chloe now. I've been called a parasite in my own home. After 7 years of supporting my sister financially and emotionally after being her safety net and her bank, I've been treated like an intruder in the one place that's entirely mine. I walked over to where my phone sat on the kitchen counter. Everyone watched me, sensing something was about to happen. I opened my banking app. "Since we're all here," I said, my voice steady and cold, "and since the police are present to witness this, I think it's time to make some things clear." I pulled up my property management account. "Chloe, the apartment you're living in, the one where you pay $800 a month. I own it. The market rent is $2,500. I've been subsidizing your housing to the tune of $1,700 every single month for 3 years. That's over $60,000 in below-market rent that I've effectively given you." Chloe's face drained of color. Ethan looked confused, like he was doing math in his head and not liking the result. "Effective immediately," I said, tapping my phone. "Your rent is returning to market rate, $2,500 per month due on the 1st, like any other tenant. You'll receive official notice from my property manager tomorrow." "You can't do that," Chloe gasped. "I absolutely can," I said. "I'm your landlord, and I've been far too generous." I pulled up another account. "Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, the comfortable 2-bedroom apartment you've been living in for the past 3 years. Do you remember how you got it?" Robert Thorne nodded slowly, his face gray. You helped us find it. You negotiated with the landlord." "I did more than that," I said. "Your credit wasn't sufficient to qualify, so I personally guaranteed your lease. I put my own financial reputation on the line for you because Chloe begged me to help her in-laws have a stable home. And tonight, I discovered that this is how that kindness is repaid." I made another tap on my phone. "I'm notifying the landlord tomorrow that I'm withdrawing my guarantee. You'll need to requalify on your own merits or find alternative housing." Martha let out a sob. Robert just stared at the floor. "And finally," I turned my attention to Chloe again, the white SUV parked in my driveway. "The one you've been driving for 2 years. Do you remember what you told me when you asked for it?" Chloe couldn't meet my eyes. "You said," I continued relentlessly, "that you desperately needed reliable transportation for Martha's medical appointments, that your current car wasn't safe, that you'd pay me back every month. Do you know how many payments you've actually made?" Silence. "4, I said. 4 payments in 24 months. I've covered over $30,000 of that loan myself. And tonight you used that vehicle that I paid for to break into my house." I pulled up the auto finance company's app. "As of tomorrow morning, I'm contacting the financing company to repossess the vehicle. You have until 9 a.m. to remove any personal belongings from it." "No!" Chloe lunged forward, but Detective Miller stepped between us. "Ma'am, you need to stay calm," Miller warned. Chloe ignored her, her voice rising to a shriek. "You can't do this. It's Christmas. We need that car. How am I supposed to get to work? How are we supposed to live?" "Those questions," I said quietly, "are no longer my problem. You're 32 years old, Chloe. You have a husband who works. You're both able-bodied adults. Figure it out like everyone else does without a sister playing fairy godmother." "But we're family!" Chloe cried, and now tears were streaming down her face, though I suspected they were tears of fury as much as sadness. "You can't just abandon family." "You're right," I said. "Which is why for 7 years I sacrificed my own financial security and peace of mind to help you. I paid for your wedding. I subsidized your rent. I bought you a car. I helped your in-laws. I gave you money every time you asked, never expecting repayment because you were family. And in return, you invaded my home, drank my wine, ate my food, and called me a parasite." I picked up the wine glass she'd been holding earlier. "The moment those words left your mouth, Chloe, you ended our relationship. Not me. You." Detective Miller cleared her throat. "Folks, I understand this is emotional, but it's late and the weather is getting worse. You need to collect your things and leave now. Is there anyone who